The Desolate Atmosphere holds so much emotion despite the lack of detail. There's a surprising amount of sadness that can be held by simply leaving the detail mostly unsaid in the environment. But there's also those moments of respite which stitch these hollow and barren areas together and give the audience a breather. And yet we hardly ever see this type of atmosphere. So today I'd like to discuss what makes them so special. I think the largest slip up when it comes to making this type of atmosphere is that sometimes producers think desolation just means a lack of detail. But desolation doesn't come from the lack of detail, but rather the use of empty space for the viewer to focus on. This is usually done with the sky, and at least in my opinion, works best at dusk or dawn to create a sharp contrast. It gives this feeling of being at the edge of the world, being just on the precipice of nothingness. But this also gives a sense of vastness and an area being never-ending. But again, there still needs to be some level of subtle detail or else the area will feel extremely bland. Using flat details that don't particularly jump out make an area feel plain and uninteresting. Low-level details like rocks, shrubs, and even abandoned structures can all support an open area without it feeling empty or boring. But of course, a desolate atmosphere is nothing without an area of respite. Again, I think this is another area where producers kinda screw up and make these areas feel really built up and inhabited. These areas of refuge should feel barely held together, as though the people here are surviving, but are still reliant on the barren wasteland at their doorstep. And I think that leads to these areas being really special, as they give off feelings of cold comfort, or even coziness. It gives an otherwise barren, depressing atmosphere an air of hope. This can even be done on a small scale, with signs of human activity and life, but no one to be seen nearby. It creates this sense of loneliness but persistence, which is why I think I love this atmosphere so much. For a large part of my life, I've suffered with not really feeling socially comfortable in being myself, or really opening up to people as a whole, and because of that, I've always attached to that feeling of isolation because I knew it all too well, but at the same time was never close to giving up. I'm not going to delve into it too much because I want to make a video on that kind of stuff later on, and also I'm just some random guy on the internet that you know nothing about. But what's important is that this atmosphere reflects a particularly hard time in my life and makes the feeling it evokes so personal and captivating. So whenever life gets hard, I always end up coming back to here.